Hi there, I'm Joey from EDH Rec. The other day I got to play a game of Magic with some friends who hadn't played together for a little while, and the wildest thing happened. Several of us got off to a pretty decent start. I got a board full of tokens, another person ramped into some giant green creatures, everyone got a good board state going, except for one of us. One player only managed to get a few mana rocks, a pair of Swiftfoot boots, some self-mill spells to get a chunk of cards into their graveyard, but they didn't play anything that created a presence on the battlefield. And on turn 6, that player was obliterated, attacked by everyone else for lethal at the earliest possible opportunity. Their deck didn't get to do the thing, they didn't even get to cast their commander. And that player was just so delighted. They had a blast. Here's why. The deck they were playing was Bruna, Light of Alabaster, an Azorius Angel who, on attack, slams a bunch of auras into play from your hand and from your graveyard. Their deck contains a whole bunch of self-mill, so that when Bruna gets her attack, it's going to bring back so much stuff that she will just knock someone out so bad. She's going to become absurdly powerful, protected in every possible way, and she'll probably even have lifelink to help gain 40 plus life. And not only that, but there's also stuff like Sphere of Safety in that deck too, so that once those enchantments are all in play, trying to attack the Bruna player won't even be an option on the table anymore. So, before I said who the commander was, I expect some folks reacted to the game events I described with a kind of, oh dang, feeling. Perhaps surprise or sympathy that the person who didn't get to develop their board or even cast their commander was still knocked out ASAP. A feeling that it's a bummer that that person's deck didn't get a chance to do the thing. But if you've ever seen a Bruna deck do Bruna things, then you're probably like, whew, y'all dodged a bullet. And that extreme contrast in feeling is what I want to talk about today. So, okay, what was the point of this story? Well, first, obviously, is just that framing is very important. When you're not told all of the information, sometimes a story can be framed to make an audience feel a certain type of way. That's not really a magic lesson necessarily, it's just sort of a life thing. Please stay vigilant about whether you're getting complete information as a citizen of the internet. But second, and the more important core takeaway of this video, is that game stood out to me as a very good example of player behavior that I think we as Commander folks can and should learn from. We recently published our longest and most ambitious EDH Rec podcast episode ever, link in the description, where we tracked the history of the top 100 commanders over time. Which commanders were just flash in the pan, which ones stood strong, which ones had comebacks and resurgences. There's so much data. If you haven't seen that episode yet, you've got to give it a look. That data is fascinating. And if you like what we do and don't want to miss super epic videos like that, you should like and subscribe. We've seen the numbers. Not everyone who watches us regularly actually is subscribed, but we do some pretty cool stuff here. You should give it a shot. I don't know. Anyway, on that video, we got this comment about a commander whose data we had examined in that video, and I think this comment really cuts right to the heart of what I'm talking about here. I really think we need to normalize playing commanders like Sheoldred more. People need to learn how to play Magic more than just, I get to hide in my safe space and spend 5 to 6 turns doing whatever I want with no punishment. What's the difference between her and another commander who can be a part of a combo or can generate huge value? Either way, it's moving you towards winning the game. If no one plays a more aggressive commander, then the game is just going to end with someone doing some big thing and everyone dies anyway. And man, that one stuck with me. In principle, I agree. A commander like Sheoldred pings you and pings you and pings you, and it's irksome, it's annoying, and that generates quite a lot of attention and buzz and discussion around her in a way that doesn't necessarily happen for a commander like Bruna, who doesn't do anything until she does, until she hits you like a bullet train. So by and large, I think it is fair to assess that often a bad habit of commander players is that we can get caught up and distracted by the little nuisances and devote more attention to those little things at the expense of dealing with the Brunas of the world. Even if that Sheoldred deck wouldn't win the game until turn 10, but that Bruna deck would win on turn 8, we're still more likely to want to swat at the thing that's been a mosquito all game, rather than to focus fire that far away but oncoming train. Now, of course, let's not forget to adjust our nuance glasses. Yes, sometimes Sheoldred players can land like a peer into the abyss and knock a player out with their life drain just off of one spell. Sheoldred is also capable of some very bombastic plays. She does not purely nickel and dime. There are some seams on these examples. But the core of what that commenter is getting at is worth internalizing, right? Sometimes we as commander players can and do get caught up in more of those nettling nuisances rather than getting caught up in the looming catastrophes, and that's to our own detriment. We sometimes do just kind of go towards the thing we can currently see, and we leave alone the thing that we can't see yet. And I get it. Sometimes it's just more satisfying to attack the person who's been doing a lot of little stuff than it is to attack the person who isn't a problem yet. But that's not always the most strategically sound decision. Or for another supporting example here, I think it's also fair to observe the difference in emotions that players can sometimes have between their creature getting counterspelled and their creature getting destroyed. On average, one of those things evokes a much bigger reaction than the other, even though the end result is basically the same. So there's some emotion-forward thinking going on there. Now that's the kind of impulse that people may unlearn as they get better and better at the game, but that can take some time. And in a format this big with so many players at various different stages of their Commander playing careers, it is going to be more common to encounter those types of mentalities. Basically, it just feels important to point out that we're not all always as driven by cold hard logic as we think we are. Sometimes humans act on impulse and come up with rationalizations for it later. And that's a weird and sucky thing about being a person, but we do gotta talk about it if we're gonna solve it. Now, you're a smart, attentive, and attractive viewer, so I'm sure you've got a good grasp on this concept already by now. I could very easily wrap this up by saying that this is the bad habit that Commander players should stop doing. That we need to pay attention not just to the little problems, to those little things that activate our instincts and impulses, but we also got to pay attention to those threats we can't see yet. Examine not just what's present, but also the game's future. That's a damn good lesson that 100% will help you out in a game, so I could end it with that and call it a video. And believe me, I'm tempted to. I'm in the process of moving to a new apartment and I've got some travel coming up, so I would love for there to be less work on my plate. But it must needs be remarked that this philosophy kinda clashes with the usual adage that Commander players like to throw around a lot, and which I myself have said plenty of times, that we want each deck to do the thing. It's a multiplayer social format. We want to be here having a good evening with our friends. A lot of people play EDH as a beer and pretzels lean back type of deal. We're not trying to be cutthroat, we're here for a good time. So when one person sits there all game and does not get to contribute or have an impact, we don't feel pleased that we have an easier game against them. We feel bummed out on their behalf. That is normal, that is compassionate, that is human, that is good. It is one of my favorite qualities of the people that I get to play with when they are in tune with that vibe. We're not here just for the winning, we're here because we like each other. We're not gonna even probably remember who won, we're gonna remember whether we had a good time. We're gonna remember the coolest play. And the coolest plays are more common in games where everyone played a role in shaping the events that unfolded. But also, if you play a Joe to the Unifier and untap with it, good lord, I might get hit for 100 points of damage on that very turn. So yeah, maybe I'm gonna stop you before you have the chance to pick up any momentum. Many of us hold both of those philosophies in our brains at the same time. That yes, we want everyone to contribute, but also I can't let you do your thing. Sometimes those things clash. Sometimes those different things are taken too far or twisted, or people are just on completely different pages about what each of those things mean. And when that happens, that disconnect can lead to a social friction that makes your games less fun. So that's why this matters. To acknowledge once again what that commenter said earlier, that sensation of, quote, spending 5 to 6 turns doing whatever I want with no punishment, yeah, that ain't great. And sometimes it can come off like that. That is sometimes a mentality that we can accidentally purport. I spend 5 turns doing whatever I want with no interruption is a sort of toxic and twisted end result of the I hope everyone gets to do the thing mentality. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't want to die before turn 5 or whatever. I maintain that I want everyone to contribute in an ideal game and not for things to be over before they get the chance to begin. But yeah, speaking for myself, I don't want players to leave me completely alone for 5 turns either. I've seen exactly the kind of thing that this commenter is referring to, and it's just not the kind of game that I want all the time. I want the pressure, the interaction, the struggle. That's what the game is. That's Commander. That's Magic. Let's go back to that Bruna player example. That game would have been and felt a lot different if they had complained about being knocked out first, even when they had basically nothing on the board, or if they had tried to deflect, or if they had voiced how much it bummed them out, or any of the above. What the Bruna player was delighted. They were on the cusp of becoming undefeatable, but they got stopped at the last second. Something I admire so much about this friend is how appreciative they are in moments like that. They heartily took it as a sign of respect and good threat assessment by the person who KO'd them. In other words, the Bruna player needing to be eliminated is the contribution to the game. They forced the tempo. They forced the rest of us off our butts. We didn't have time to slowly develop. We had a time limit. That's awesome, and it was even more awesome that the Bruna player understood and appreciated how the other players recognized that. But the reason I'm making this video is because, yeah, not all players are going to be like that. They're not all going to have that same type of appreciation or understanding of that dynamic. Some players will complain about being targeted even when they haven't done anything to the board yet, or they'll deflect or whatever. Some players do get vocal in various ways when they're not able to develop their game uninterrupted. And in some cases, it just ain't a cute look. For anyone who feels that emotion or instinct come up when they get targeted like that in a game, maybe think of it this way. If you vocalize the emotion that you're feeling there, and then people do leave you alone for a little while, and then you go on to win that game, I think it's important to ask yourself, how does that come off to everybody? If you play a game with those folks in the future, are they likely to believe you again? Just something to consider when you're in moments like that. Feeling the emotion, the instinct, the disappointment, the whatever. I mean, that's fine. Of course that's going to happen. We're all going to feel how we feel. But how we respond to that, how we vocalize that emotion, that matters a lot. And some forms of vocalizing those emotions will retroactively look really, really awkward if you then go on to trounce the table after you bought yourself a little bit more time left alone, you know? We should just strive to make sure that we don't appear as though we're trying to weaponize other people's sympathies. Personally, I also think that the faster and more efficient the Commander format gets, the more at risk of these types of clashes we become. We all want social decks where everyone can contribute, but if the game reaches a point of near every deck just being that bullet train, faster bullet trains than Bruna, then it all kind of can become about just like who can bullet train the fastest. And that is going to make those clashes a lot harder to reconcile if people have the do the thing mentality, especially if they have the twisted version of that philosophy that can turn itself into the impression that therefore I'll be left alone in a bubble for a little while. Like, to clarify, there are already a lot of commanders that embody that bullet train idea. If they do the thing once, the game is all but over. I am not saying don't play those. I find hyper-powered games very, very fun, and Lord knows that CEDH players live for it. What I am saying is that if you're playing one of those decks, it is hard to reconcile or justify the "why are you targeting me, I haven't done anything" mentality when you're piloting something that everyone else regards as a looming sword of Damocles over the entire battlefield. And it gets harder too, because not all players are necessarily going to be on the same page about which commanders or strategies pose the big future threat and which commanders don't. See our "It's Not That Deck" video we did a while back. Sometimes players aren't as familiar with the most dangerous lines of play as others are, so they really are not playing that deck. And sometimes players use lines like "it's not that deck" in a way that is frankly not entirely honest. The reason that we preach communication is key so often on this channel is simply because there's no one-size-fits-all solution to help parse that. And only by actually having a dang chat are you ever going to figure that out. As Commander folk, we have seen many people say many things about Commander players as a whole. The internet is rife with allegations that Commander players are horrible at threat assessment, Commander players don't know what removal is, Commander players ruined the game. We've all seen our fair share of disparaging comments, videos, articles, whatever. Now, Commander is the most popular format of Magic the Gathering right now. It ain't like we're some underdog or sidelined group that's getting picked on. I don't need to bust out a shield to defend anything, I don't think. No, I'm saying this part more for myself. There's a very real worry in my brain that by making a video like this, I may accidentally contribute to a type of attitude or mentality online that I actually find, frankly, to be quite unbecoming. Because zooming out, ultimately, this video is about a thing that a group of players do. And by pointing it out and trying to say, hey, let's cut this out, maybe, I worry that that can become fuel for others to point at and feel superior to people who exhibit that critiqued behavior. So I guess I just want to clarify that just isn't what I'm about. That's why I couldn't just call it a day earlier on in the video. Because some of these lessons are ones that I'm ashamed to say that I learned the hard way. So I'm not going to pretend that I'm above it or superior to anything. I critique it because I've been it. Sometimes those social frictions are things that happened to me, and sometimes the social frictions are things that happened because of me. And in as much as I can, I want to share this kind of stuff in the hopes that by highlighting the things that have punctured the fun in my games, maybe that will help you avoid some of those fun draining moments in the games that you play. It's a very organic reaction to feel indignant or slighted or whatever if someone is attacking you when you haven't even affected the board state yet. But how you respond to or vocalize your emotion in that moment matters a lot and will affect the fun of the game. And by the same token, it's a very organic reaction to hear stories of those people who have complained about being targeted and to have a strong opinion about their behavior. But the way you respond to or vocalize your emotion in that moment matters a lot too. I love Commander. I love playing Commander. I love brewing Commander. I love seeing the way that people express themselves through their deck building in Commander. And when you love something a whole lot, you care a lot when there are flaws too. We hyper-scrutinize out of passion and affection. That hyper-scrutiny usually gets applied to the game itself, the card design, the lines of play, the deck building opportunities, etc. But also, all that attention on the format can draw scrutiny to the people who play it too. And we've seen people do that in a way that I don't think is necessarily charitable or kind or fair. But I hope that this evaluation of Commander players has been somewhat charitable or kind or fair, because end of the day, sometimes paying more attention to ourselves is necessary to help us actually sandpaper off some of our rougher edges. So I hope this helps at least some folks become a little more in tune than they were before with those moments where they can be the Bruna player, when they can roll with those punches and appreciate or respect the times where they've been recognized for the potential future impact and danger that they represent, even if it means they got taken out fast. But all in all, that's going to be it from me. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know any thoughts that you've got about bad Commander habits in the comments. Are there other things that you think Commander folks should knock it off or pay more attention to? Light up the comments, click the YouTube things. Thanks so much for watching. And as always, remember, EDH wreck your deck before you wreck your deck.